Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Reinhardt, a statewide news service, and jbiztechvalley.com. We have a very, very special guest with us, Bethlehem Town Council, William Reinhardt. Can I call you Bill or Will?
Either is fine.
Bill, welcome to the Jewish View.
Yeah, welcome. It's the first time you're here.
Thank you for having me.
And have you been on the council how many years now?
I joined the council last year in a special election, and then I recently won re-election to a four-year term.
Mazel tov.
Give you a mazel. Use some Jewish words, hopefully.
So we're happy to have you on the show for the first time. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? Where in Bethlehem do you live, and what has been your background, and where did you grow up?
Okay. Well, I guess I can say I began, I grew up in the West Coast, Palo Alto, California.
Okay.
Usually everybody goes the other way.
I know.
Usually from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Palo Alto
I know, I hear that all the time. Why are you here?
Right.
But basically, I went east to Cornell for college, and met a wonderful woman there who was from Rochester, New York. And we've been in the East ever since. We spent some time down in Baltimore, and then we moved up here when Gail, my wife, Gail Landsman, got a tenure-track position at SUNY Albany. And that's when I began working at NYSERDA, and I had 26 years. The New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
And what does Gail do for SUNY?
She's a professor. Well, now she's professor emeritus, but she had a degree in anthropology, and so she was a cultural anthropologist there.
Really? Okay.
And great professor.
I took an anthropology class, the ethnology of film.
Okay, that sounds like that would be a very interesting course.
It was. George Clymer was my teacher. He was great. Yeah, he was very interesting.
So we moved up here in 1984 for that, and we moved to Bethlehem in 1989, and we've been living right on Route 85 near Tollgate Ice Cream in Slingerlands, that section of town, since then. I retired from NYSERDA at the end of 2010, and actually a lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of informed by my experience and my work at NYSERDA, where I worked on the green economy and innovation and technology for manufacturers.
And you were at NYSERDA when Paul Tonko was there before he became congressman.
Yes. I first met Paul when he was still chairing the Energy Committee
in the Assembly.
In fact, one of the first times I worked with him closely was on the issue of the beech nut plant and keeping it in the area rather than going to North Carolina. So that was one of my happy accomplishments while I was at NYSERDA. So I retired from NYSERDA in 2010. I continued to be involved with energy and sustainability issues through a nonprofit energy group, the Capital Region Energy Forum, that I chaired for a while and helped get started. And then I got involved at the local level in town matters just a few years ago, first on John Clarkson's budget advisory team, and then last year I ran for office for the first time ever, and then I ran again this last season that just ended.
How old are you?
I'm 63.
Okay.
So
you're a young man. You look 36.
Well, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that any day. That's my background, and as I said, a lot of the work that I did at NYSERDA was dealing with energy and environmental issues, the implications for society in general as well as the local level, and I helped do economic development based on what a lot of people call the innovation economy, or some people call it the green economy. That's the term I tend to use because people have a sense of what it means to be green.
So how does that connect to Bethlehem? I mean, I don't see the connection.
Well, let me explain that. When you talk about economic development, or when you talk about how you're going to develop your community, the way the green relates is I talk about the green economy as a type of economic development that is preferred, and I'd say preferred by most voters in Bethlehem. I was very explicit about that when I campaigned, that's what I wanted to accomplish. And in fact, when I first got involved at the local level politically, I was very clear, based on my experience at NYSERDA, this is the direction we have to take as a society, and it's a smart way to go at the local level. And then in terms of development, it's smart growth is like the type of development you do when you build housing, when you bring in new businesses. How do you orient your infrastructure to provide the services that you need, but do them efficiently, so the cost burden on the existing taxpayers is minimized while getting the benefits of a broadened tax base. So basically, the green economy in the context of our community means encouraging energy efficiency technologies, energy efficiency companies, encouraging renewable energy in town, and I've already started to accomplish that with some things I've done since joining the board last January. And also looking at startups and getting back to the issue of innovation, new technologies to deal with our environmental problems, creating the jobs that go with the mitigation efforts. And if you mentioned Paul Tonko earlier, ever since he was in the Assembly, the state has been investing in the Capital District, in innovation, and in the green economy. Not only in the Capital District, but across the state. And I participated in a lot of that through my years at NYSERDA. But what is kind of unique about the Capital District is you look at the chip fab investments that we've made up in Malta, the Nano College, and things like that. That is not happening everywhere in the state. I mean, it's starting to happen elsewhere in the state, but primarily it's been happening here.
Well, they're moving Nano to Utica and Buffalo.
Right, that's what's now happening.
Right.
But why is that happening?
The governor, sees the opportunity and sees that there are, farms and manufacturing, which was what kept upstate between Utica and Buffalo vibrant, is now dwindling. And so he's finding that nanotech is going to be...
What's your answer that why did they center it in the Capital District?
Well, I think it started really with the vision that led to the beginnings of the Nano College. Elaine Caleros and the others there at the university when they started that whole process going, and also the political leadership of the state, whether it was Democrat or Republican, since then. Since 1988, I think.
Yeah, because Mario Cuomo was the first.
Mario was the starter of it, but George Pataki participated strongly. I was at the event when Global Foundries announced they're bringing the plant, and it was at the Nano College. And Governor Pataki was there along with Shelley Silver, and the leadership, bipartisan leadership was there, and the business community was there, and we all saw what it could mean to the Capital District. And now, in fact, we're starting to see that when you look at the employment implications and all of that. And so that miracle is probably too strong a word, but that exciting benefit has happened and is happening here in the Capital District. And now, you mentioned Utica and Rochester, where there's another thing going on there. Remember, that's my hometown. I did a lot of research projects there. I'm familiar with what's going on there at the Kodak Park and other places, like in the Canandaigua facility, which used to be an optics research center. And those things are essentially efforts to say that wonderful thing that's happening in the Capital District, we want to try to take that across upstate New York. One of the kind of sort of sad things that I can observe after my many years at NYSERDA is when I came to NYSERDA in 1985 is when I started work there. The general perception was upstate New York, with all of its manufacturing jobs, was the economic backbone of the state. And New York City was struggling. Because remember, it wasn't that many years before that New York City had a fiscal crisis. And now the tables have turned. For whatever reasons, we don't have enough time to go into that now, but New York City has been the economic engine of the state, and upstate has been struggling. And so, yes, this effort at the innovation economy is really saying, how do we use innovation to reinvigorate and revitalize the upstate manufacturing base and broaden that base?
Right.
And I really am very optimistic about these things. If we're good about it, we can actually see a lot of things that have been offshored, manufacturing that's gone overseas, Some of that can come back,
Sure can.
and some of that can change depending on our own choices, which really is some of what I want to talk about with the green economy. When you choose to buy local, support local agriculture, support your local businesses, you can then generate more local demand for locally made food, locally manufactured products, and that will keep money circulating in our own economy instead of sending it off to China, or in the case of energy efficiency and renewables, instead of sending it off to the Middle East to buy oil.
So let me just ask you, from a town perspective, from a town level, not so much globally, when people think of green, they think of, if they're attuned to this concept, they'll think of bicycles, they'll think of flex fuel cars, they'll think of geothermal, they'll think of windmills. I mean, is all of that in the future for...
Not all of it, and here's why I say that. In the town of Bethlehem, we probably don't have a really good wind resource, unlike other parts. Like the Midwest has very good wind, very good steady wind. Offshore, in the Atlantic, there's very strong winds, almost 24/7. So wind farms make more sense there than they do in much of the state. We do have wind farms in New York. I don't want to imply we don't, but right in the town of Bethlehem, we don't have the same wind that you have in the Adirondacks or in the upper in the Mohawk Valley and some of those areas where the wind farms are very successful, or offshore.
Now geothermal is pretty
geothermal. There are two kinds of geothermal. Remember, there's a really hot rocks that are reachable through drilling technology that can bring up very hot or very warm energy temperatures to run steam turbines and that kind of thing. But the other geothermal that makes more sense here is the earth-coupled heat pump, which is already starting to happen. And that's another example of where NYSERDA did have some effect encouraging that technology in New York State. And we now see a lot of single-family homes and developments built using the geothermal energy, because it's a lot easier to take the heat out of the ground or put it in the ground when you're cooling than it is to take it in and out of the air through a conventional air conditioner.
Everybody has a unit doing it specifically, or it's a city kind of thing then giving
Well,
it
it
out?
wouldn't be citywide, but like developments. A shopping center might have a system, or a single-family home could have a system, or an office building could have a system.
The new library on New Scotland Avenue in Albany has geothermal heating. They have the geothermal units that when they built it for energy efficiency.
Yeah, it's becoming more common now. Now there's often the kind of a trade-off you get in the world of energy and or environmental remediation is you have a front-end cost, you have a capital cost, but then you make that investment back in savings.
Over years.
And sometimes, when I worked with industry, for example, the payback threshold would be about 2 years. So they wouldn't invest in an energy efficiency improvement unless they could get their money back out in 2 years. That's actually
That's
a very
fast.
that's a very fast and that's a very demanding threshold. A lot of homeowners would make investments where their payback might be 5 to 7 years, sometimes more.
Now, what about solar panels? You see Monolith Solar advertising all over the place. But is that something? I mean, we have a lot of
solar is a really good opportunity here in this area, and most people aren't aware of it. But if you look at the drive by the Owens Corning plant down south of here by Elm Park, that is one of the biggest solar projects in the entire state.
I see the whole roof. I've gone by there. I was wondering once you were saying that the whole roof has solar panels.
Well, no, it's not on the roof. It's in a field next to the glass melting plant.
And that's providing all the electricity for that plant?
It only provides 6% of the electricity for their plant. But
It's
it's still one of the biggest solar projects in the state.
And it's worth it for them?
And there are NYSERDA incentives that make it help, make the economics look better, and there are federal incentives. You can question why does the federal government and the state have incentives? Well, if you think about it, it's because we need to get off fossil energy.
Yes.
We have climate issues we have to address, and if we don't, we're just putting our head in the sand and not looking forward. And plus, there are the economic benefits of creating that employment, those jobs associated with the green industry. And that's really, when I talk about the green economy, part of it's the manufacturing of the solar cells, which unfortunately too many of them now are made in China. And that's why the industry in this country has been hurting, is because the Chinese have lowered the price of solar panels so much that it hurt the manufacturing base of that product in the country. On the other hand, it has made it cheaper and more economical for all of us who want to install. So the economic opportunities right now are for the installation workforce, the construction, the service of those facilities. And that is one of our objectives of one of the DOE grants that we have now in town, is to encourage that industry, the solar industry in town, and that means the installers, the service providers.
Okay.
And once people install those systems and they are not exporting their dollars to buy energy, because almost any kind of energy you buy, if it's not renewable, your dollars are leaving the area to pay for that fuel. So that keeps the money in our local economy, so that recirculates the dollars in our economy, and that's one of the real advantages of the whole buy local idea, whether it's renewable energy from the sun or whether it's local agriculture.
I wanted to point out to the audience and to let you know, in case you didn't, about behind the Chili's in Glenmont Shopping Plaza by the Price Chopper. There's a Chili's restaurant. Behind that is an electric recharging station for the cars.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
that's great.
Charging you for charging your car, I guess.
Well, the whole electric vehicle issue is another interesting one, and I think it's got a real solid future. I had been involved with fuel cell work at NYSERDA in the hydrogen program that Governor Pataki funded several years ago, and the world is going towards fuel cell cars and electric cars. Right now, the U.S. is primarily focused on the electric option, the all-electric vehicle.
Which is why they have the electric charge.
Which is why you have the charging station. NYSERDA is doing a lot in that area as well. I apologize if I keep mentioning NYSERDA, but that's where I come from.
That's
and
okay.
I still have that mindset.
It's not a commercial.
On a different topic, which would be like on fracking, even though I don't think it's a Bethlehem or an Albany County issue, no one's going to frack in our backyard. But, are you for that, or you talk about energy independence. I don't make up my mind, but the other people say, well, if we have fracking, you say like that, the dollars won't go outside of New York State.
That is the art, or outside of the areas where the fracking happens.
Yeah.
I have to say I'm not a fan of hydrofracking.
Why?
And I kind of started out that way. And it was because to me it was a way to get off coal, and it was a way to supplant oil with natural gas. But I'd have to say two things. Primarily, if you look at the whole picture from a climate perspective, first of all, there's a debate as to whether the methane emissions from the whole hydrofracking process are worse than the emissions from the coal option. Because the methane is a much more powerful and potent greenhouse gas than CO2 is.
But it's naturally occurring. It's already in the water.
In some cases it is.
Yeah.
But from the hydrofracking processes, you're releasing a lot more methane that was there before. So I'm not a fan of that from that standpoint, and I guess the issue is really we need to be getting away from all the fossil energies that have greenhouse gas emissions associated with them. So even what you can debate whether or not it's worse than coal or coal-fired power plants, and coal, we all know, is a very dirty fuel. So when people talk about clean coal, I kind of laugh because
it's an oxymoron.
It's an oxymoron.
I heard there's new innovations. That's what I heard once.
People, and I've seen presentations about how once you get it out of the ground, how you use it can be cleaned by removing the CO2, sequestering it, and taking it out, controlling it. Again, I alluded to environmental remediation technologies before. The whole idea of cleaning up your coal emissions is part of that. The problem is, in my opinion, we haven't figured out a way to get the coal out of the ground cleanly. Ask the people of West Virginia, ask the people of any coal mining area, ask the communities where the mountaintop removal is happening. We're getting more and more. We're having to go farther and farther to get our coal, to get our oil, and to get our natural gas. These technologies that we're using now, we're using them because the quality of the resource continues to go down. That's why we have to go deeper, farther. We have to mine very narrow seams, which is where the horizontal drilling comes in.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned coal, because at the National Governors Association this week in Washington, 7 northeastern governors signed a pledge to try to keep the emissions out of the Northeast, but Governor Cuomo personally didn't sign it. He sent the DEC Commissioner, Joe Martens, and had him sign the pledge. But all the other states, the governor themselves signed it. And it's just interesting.
Why,
The
what's the
governor
reason?
wouldn't put, well,
He was
One can speculate why that
he may
might
have
be.
national ambitions and didn't want to put his name on something like that, which would alienate the coal-burning states.
Yeah. That's that issue is one that's been around for like
decades.
Decades.
Oh, absolutely.
Decades. When I was in grad school, I learned about acid rain and how
Yes.
all the acid in the rain was coming from those same states.
Yes.
And then landing on the
Killing
Adirondacks
the
and
lakes
destroying
in the
the lakes in the Adirondacks. So we're bearing the brunt of the coal emissions, which are heavily acidic, from the uncontrolled stacks farther west.
But I got to tell you, Ronald Reagan in the 1980s had a solution for eliminating or reducing the acid in the Adirondacks. He said, drop a huge Rolate tablet to neutralize the acid. And that was the
Well, as long as you're
That
not
was-
under the tablet when it
that
lands.
was
I
the
guess
joke
that's-
that went around.
Yeah, no, but actually, I have seen, on a more serious level, I've
Yes.
seen studies of liming the lakes to do the same thing, to make them less acidic, more basic,
Right.
and to neutralize the acidity and try
You don't
to...
hear about that anymore. Is
No,
there
you don't.
such an issue? I mean, you're right.
What,
It used
the acid rain?
it used to be. It was a big thing, and like a lot of times in the news, it's a big issue, and then they change to something else. You don't hear about it.
Well,
So is it better, maybe?
I would say that progress has been made, but are all the lakes the way they were before? No,
Never will be.
they're not, and I don't know that they ever will be.
Well, but they never are based on the ecology and just the ecosystems. They'll never be the same as they were before.
They
It's
probably-
always
yeah.
evolving and changing.
Change does always happen. Whether or not the change that is happening now is the best we could have done or the best we could have managed it. If we managed it differently, I suspect not. But
Well, look, if it's not one thing, it's another. It's zebra mussels, or it's milfoil, or it's something.
There's-
There'll
yeah.
always be something.
and I think part of the answer to your question is that other issues have taken precedence over the acid rain issue. A lot of effort has been spent on it. Newer issues have come up. If you think about it, when when acid rain was first an issue, climate change was on nobody's radar,
That's right.
or almost nobody's. Some scientists, yes, but the general public had no idea what it was. Now that's much different. Remember, back 20 years, our dependence on foreign oil was the big issue. And that has become less of an issue now, partly because of the unconventional extraction techniques that we're now talking about, the hydrofracking and stuff like that. But frankly, I don't think that's really a long-term answer either, because remember, if you think about it, what we're doing is we're going to the more difficult to get resources, right? The easy stuff is what you get first. And so we are now using hydrofracking and these other technologies, the horizontal drilling, to get that stuff out of the ground, but it's way more expensive. We're never going to have cheap energy like we had before. It's way more expensive, and you don't get as good a return on your investment for dollar invested, and the energy return on energy invested keeps going down. In other words, you're spending more and more energy to get that useful barrel of oil or that useful million BTUs of natural gas. So we're kind of working against the trend, if you will. And the trend really is we have to find alternatives, and that means mostly renewables is the direction we need to go,
so
and much more efficient.
On a more pedestrian level, literally, we were just there's going to be areas of the town that are going to be reshaped in terms of sidewalks and adding sidewalks and stuff. But bicycle lanes or bicycle sharing on the road doesn't seem to be something that town officials are comfortable with, especially with Furbush Road, and because of how narrow some of the streets are around here.
I'd answer
Can
that
you
question
address
this
that
way.
somehow?
We
Maybe I'm
have
not
we
getting
have a
into that.
sustainability plan on the town website, and I would encourage listeners and viewers to go look to that website. When I talk about that a lot, in the campaign I talked about it, that basically we have a wonderful plan. Now we have to implement it. and no plan is any better than its implementation.
Right.
So we have some great ideas about encouraging bike paths, mobility alternatives to the automobile. That means primarily pedestrian and bike in town. Occasionally it will mean also public transit for those people that work downtown, trying to get there on a bus as opposed to commuting in a single occupancy car,
right.
or ride sharing. That also makes sense in certain circumstances. So all of those things are in the sustainability plan, but it really gets road specific as to whether or not the bikes make sense. You know, you're not going to put bikes on 85 in Albany, right?
Okay.
That stretch of 85. But bike paths around town are definitely a hot item. We have a bike and pedestrian committee that's been active for several years now, and they've done some great work. And there's always more to be done, because once people see how nice it is to be able to get on your bike and go to certain places, then other people want it. And same with sidewalks. Once you start getting sidewalks into some of these areas, other people say, "Gee, that's nice. I'd like to be able to do that myself."
Do you bicycle?
I don't bicycle much.
Do you have a flex fuel car?
No, and actually, you know, flex fuel cars to me are not a real answer.
Okay.
Ethanol has some issues that I am not real comfortable with our
so
ethanol
do you just
policies.
have a regular, what kind of car do you have?
My primary vehicle is a Prius.
Okay, and it's electric?
It's not electric. It's a gas.
Uh-huh.
I mean, well, yes, it has regenerative braking, and it's an early Prius. The newer Priuses have a bigger electric
What
motor.
do you do in your personal life to make your life more green?
That's a good question. I try to make my house efficient.
How?
Controlling air leaks, putting in a high efficiency boiler, putting in insulation.
But you didn't do solar in your house? Or
No, but I
geothermal?
buy solar. I buy 100% green power. I did consider solar, and I, like many people in the town of Bethlehem, have a problem putting solar on our roofs in that we have a lot of trees.
Okay.
In some cases, certain houses, and it's kind of ironic, I noticed this when I was campaigning. The two things that I noticed, well, first to answer your question, okay, so I buy green power. I grow most of my own food,
Okay.
which I enjoy it.
Great.
You know, it's good exercise. Not everybody can do it. So as I'm walking around town in the last 2 years doing my campaigning door to door, I realize a lot of people don't have space to do the kind of gardening that I do. You know, I'm blessed with a big yard where I can put in a 60 by 60 garden. They also don't have the ability to put solar on their roofs, either because of the way the building was built, which is a mistake we've been making for decades, is orienting buildings wrong. We should orient all of our buildings to be retrofittable.
Friendly.
Yeah, basically, so you have a roof area that you can put solar on later on, if not right away. A lot of places are now starting to do that. And also, so anyway, the solar and the garden both. Those are two things you can do to reduce your ecological footprint, if you will. I realize I have not defined that yet, but it's kind of like a carbon footprint, but it goes beyond just the issue of the fossil energy consumption embedded in your lifestyle, but also the other environmental issues that are impacted by your choices and your quote footprint. So, and there's a lot of stuff on the web about that if you want to dig into it.
I will.
But anyway, so what I've realized is that going around town, there are places where this could be done a lot more, and then there are other homes and facilities where, because of the trees or because of the lack of land, you're not necessarily going to be able to either have.
So you can personally do more in your life to be more green.
Well, if I wanted to do more at this point, I would probably try to reduce my in-house energy bill. Although, as I said, I'm buying green electricity now, so that's all made from renewable sources.
Right.
And I am, but I'm still burning natural gas to heat my house, even though I do use wood as well, as much as possible.
And you could have a different car.
I could have a different car, and probably the next car I buy could very well be an electric car.
Okay, good.
If I could buy a natural gas vehicle, I might. I have mixed feelings about it. The tailpipe emissions are very low. But then if you're using the natural gas coming from the hydrofracking and what all, now that's that complicates the matter. If you do the whole well-to-wheel analysis, if you will, pardon me for using that technical term, but it's basically looking at the whole life cycle of the decisions that you're making. And that so probably electric and getting back to NYSERDA.
You could bicycle some more.
Yes.
I mean, that would be good for your
Well,
health, and that would be
yes, bicycling more and walking.
See, I think it would make a statement if you bicycle to the town board meetings.
Yeah, be with me.
Wearing my suit, yeah. That is a constraint.
They have clamps for
I'm
the
not sure
cuffs
today
and
would have been a day to be out bicycling.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
to.
one more question
no, I'm
because we're
good.
out of town. All right, so
Anything
that's
else you wanna
perfect time. Yeah.
Well, I would just say that we really kind of went global with our discussion here, but both the green economy and the smart growth that I'm trying to encourage in town and others as well, they have a positive fiscal impact on the town and all the existing residents. And that's really, when you come to the bottom line, that's one bottom line. The other bottom line is environmental improvements, preservation of open space. The amenities that we care about in this town are preserved when you develop smartly and when you develop the right kind of economic base.
Okay.
So that's
Excellent. Thank you, Bill Reinhardt, Town Council of the Bethlehem, for being Jewish and doing good work for the town of Bethlehem, and give you a blessing that you should continue with good health and continue doing good work for Bethlehem. Thank you.
for coming on the show. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.